TaxAct understands you haven't memorized the tax code. That's why TaxAct has live experts to help. TaxAct can even do it for you if you prefer. It's the easiest way to know you're doing it right. Well, other than going back to college and obtaining a bachelor's degree in accounting with a minor in finance, then interning somewhere and becoming fluent in all tax forms. But that might be hard to accomplish before tax day. So maybe just stick with TaxAct. TaxAct. Let's get them over with.
Hello and welcome to the Cardiff Central podcast. The mid-season fixture block is finally over after 10 games in 10 weeks. We'll be going over the Blue and Blacks' defeat at the hands of Ulster and where Cornel van Zyl's men sit going into the Six Nations period. Plus, a preview of that tournament, Rag's Corner, the latest news from the Arms Park and Andrew Ford's Travel Man section. Joining me on the panel this week is the aforementioned Andrew Ford. Fordey, how are you?
Yeah, very good, thank you, mate. A little bit fragile, but not as fragile as I was expecting to be. So yeah, all good.
Good stuff. And Simon Jones. Simon, how are you?
Very good. Can't wait to hear Fordey's travel blog.
We'll start then on Saturday night in Belfast, where Cardiff fell to Ulster 21-14 to finish off this round of block of fixtures going into the Six Nations. A tough first half for the Blue and Black saw Scott Wilson and the now viral Angus Bell give the hosts a 14-0 lead. But Cornel van Zyl's hit back as Johan Mulder went over from close range. Charlie Irvine restored Ulster's lead, but Stefan Manuel's first senior try kept Cardiff in touch and ultimately secured a losing bonus point. As despite both teams spending quite a lot of time in the red zone in the final passages of the game, there was no more scores. A couple of first up 3-word thoughts. Mike said props shouldn't sidestep, which feels quite... I've just seen that clip everywhere now, and I feel bad for like Cam Winnett, who's obviously not come out of that clip looking particularly great as a prop leaves him sat on his arse. David said boring box kicks. Sid said game management questionable. Jeff said why kick why. And Rob said fairly inconsistent performance. Fordey, you were, of course, in Belfast over the weekend. You're looking surprisingly fresh, I have to say, as somebody who only landed back last night as we're recording on Tuesday. But before we get into the game, give us your travel guide of Belfast away. How was it?
Yeah, it was a really good weekend. Stayed there from Friday till late Monday evening, so it was a little bit of a slog waiting all day for the plane back. But yeah, second time I've been to Belfast. Fantastic little city, especially city centre, great proximity for like all the bars, and there's some proper good pubs there to visit. But yeah, plenty of history there as well. So if you're a bit of a history nerd and political nerd like myself, there's plenty to see when just walking around the city. And yeah, I think the Ulster fans in particular as well are very good value. So at the game, there was some good banter kind of flying around. So yeah, very good fun weekend, and would recommend to anyone in 2 seasons time, or if we inevitably get them in Europe again next year or this year.
Good stuff. Yeah, well, good to know you weren't running up and down the Shankill Road shouting political obscenities at anyone, and you've come back in one piece. Let's go on to the game then. From someone who was there, give us your general thoughts on that 80 minutes from inside Ravenhill.
Very sloppy first half. I think it was just mainly consisted of defending the whole time, more or less. Second best, kind of almost in every department. Frustrating to kind of. I think the only real highlight was getting held up over the line. That was quite frustrating. Huge improvement in the second half. I think as well, kind of when they scored their try to make it 21-7, kind of Cardiff kept their heads up and scored that try that Stefan Manuel finished off, which was a lovely try. Was very good. And I think overall, disappointing performance, but I think there were some positives to take from it. So yeah, not one I think we're going to look back fondly on come the end of the season. But I think kind of it's just a standard Cardiff rugby performance when the internationals are away, really.
Simon, your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, I wasn't looking forward to watching it back after everything in the chat from those watching it live. And I watched it. I was quite tired when I watched it. So I thought, I guess the slight positives would be there have been times in previous seasons where we've gone 21-7 down and then just been blown out. They've got a bonus point, they've won, they've scored 35, 40 points, and we've just walked away with nothing. I think to keep our heads, keep ourselves in the game. I actually thought in the first half, they had a lot of ball, and I think they had a few like passes didn't quite go to hand with the try line begging and things like that. But there were periods when I thought we frustrated them a bit with our defence. They kicked quite well in the first half as well, so they was right, putting us under pressure, which I think is something for us to think about, because I think we still kick to contest at times rather than, well, let's just nudge it into the corner if nothing's on and make them go from there. I thought all the tries we conceded were pretty awful. In terms of the prop try was spectacular, but really, should it get there? The ball's bobbling around behind. It's picked up. It's scrappy. And it is a good finish, but from that distance, you don't really want to be conceding those tries. I mean, the third try was, what happened with that ball into the scrum? You've got scrum halves putting it into the second row's legs, and I don't know what Ali Davis did there, but they've turned the ball over and gone. I think they took their chances, whereas we didn't. But watching it back, I felt it was a game in Belfast that we were in, which we are in for the last few times we've gone there. Actually, it's been contested. So I'm not too disappointed with it. I think a point's fine. But you sit there and go, well, could we have got a draw? Could we have got a win? If we'd scored, would they have gone and scored anyway? But even that last minute, the defence just to hold out and not lose our bonus point and not give them a bonus point, it shows a bit of character. So, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be on a watch, but it still feels one of those, I think it was Fordey said, and you said, Dan, frustrating that we're not quite getting there over the line in away games as Munster now and Ulster, where kind of we've been competitive and left going what could have been. As I said in the chat, I don't know whether we're getting more competitive or Irish sides are getting worse, because we've had some beatings out there, and with that much possession in the first half, in years gone by, Ulster sides would have put us away. We wouldn't have been anywhere near it.
Yes, it's interesting looking at the reaction, saying about points gained and was it there to be won. There was a couple of 3-word thoughts, quite a lot which centered around, like Hugh saying another point gained, Gareth and Glenn both said a decent point, Paul said bonus point secured, Ben, every point crucial, Gareth, 1 point gained, Tom said better than nothing. But then DCB on Facebook went with a missed opportunity. 4D, I wonder, is the headline a point gained, or is it 3 points lost there for Cardiff?
I think if you take into consideration how we performed in the first half and where exactly we were when the clock went into the red, I'd say it's a point gained, because it really looked like Ulster were going to score at the end there. So I think it was definitely the right decision to kick it out at the end to kind of solidify that point. There was no chance we were going to go up the other end to just get one extra point, would it be, in that situation? But I do think there was certainly chances that we missed out on. The James Hume turnover, I think it was like the 75th minute. That was an absolute sucker punch. And you think there's a chance to get it back into the game there. I don't think the execution was completely there. I'm sure we'll talk about the attack later on as well. But when stuff clicked, we did look quite threatening. It's just trying to kind of back that up. But it's one of those games again where you're behind the whole time in the game. It'd be nice in a game like this to kind of be a bit more on the front foot. If we were to build a lead, it'd probably be a completely different game. Yet we're kind of chasing, going in 14-0 down at half time. But as much as Ulster's a good example of a team we've had a comeback win against, realistically, it's going to be difficult to kind of overturn 14 points when you're away in Belfast. So, from that point of view, I think it's 1 point gained. But I do think maybe another day we should be targeting a win there.
I don't know what it was like in the ground, Fordey, but the cheer that went up for that 75th minute turnover from the Ulster crowd, I think said something. They were under pressure, in terms of they've thrown away leads last weekend. They threw away lead, decent lead against us, decent lead against the Scarlets. It was just the relief from their crowd from that penalty on 75 minutes was really noticeable on the feed. You kind of, that kind of pressure was relieved that they, might not end up throwing another game away.
Yeah, I think there was probably an element of, particularly in the first half, kind of confidence and smugness, and kind of as the second half was going on, and particularly after the Steph Emmanuel try, there was a lot of kind of quietness in the ground. I can't remember exactly like what particular minutes when there were certain penalties we were getting a little bit rowdy where we were in our little block with the classics, every time ref. And I think in the first half that was met with kind of replies. In the second half, when it was kind of they were just 7 points up, there wasn't maybe kind of a lot coming back from them. I think they were probably a little bit lacking confidence at that point in the game. But then, yeah, again, towards the end, in that kind of final minute when they're going for the ground, kind of they got a lot louder then as a result. But I reckon they were probably bitterly disappointed to not get that try at the end.
I think it comes back to, from a Cardiff perspective, of how well we have to start adjusting when we do make a lot of changes. I think you saw in that Exeter game, obviously this one now as well. To a degree, at the start of that Zebra game, I know we came out on top in the end, but we're a team that when we have our starting combinations and the settled players in there, we look fine from the start. We can get going. But it takes us a long time to get going in these games where we're putting different faces in and different combinations in. I mean, against Exeter, we never got going at all. Just gave up on it in the end. But this one, it took until the second half at least to properly everyone slot in and sort of understand what they're doing. And in the way that the calendar is for the Northern Hemisphere now, you will always have these games, either due to internationals being away or due to just having to rotate because you can't play everybody every week. And the very best teams are the ones, look at like, not comparing us to Leinster, but that Leinster team that have been so good because they were a machine and you could take players in and out and it didn't make any difference at all. I think Cardiff are obviously, we forget that we're still quite early in this rebuild phase and we're still building this squad up. But that's where we have to get to win these sort of games, is to get to a position where it doesn't matter if you're slotting somebody different in at 12 or changing up the back row, that it still looks exactly the same from the first minute. And I agree, Fordey, like in the circumstances of the evening, it's a point gained. You have to come away from that happy with a point. Like, then that could well be crucial at the end of the season, that point. But I think at some point we need to start getting towards being 3 points lost in the next sort of 18 months, 2 years, and challenging ourselves to go and win those sort of games in test windows. But for now, pretty happy, I think, with the point. Simon obviously mentioned a lot of the changes there. Something we discussed on the pod last week was in a few positions, Cornel van Zyl had different ways he could have gone. Looking at 12, for example, Steph Emmanuel or Rory Jennings, he could have gone Joe Cowell or Will Davis-King as the replacement tight head. Quite a lot of those he went for the young option over the maybe safer / experienced player. Was he right to do that, do we think? Was that something, or maybe would we have won if we'd gone with the safer option?
I don't think so. I don't think we would have won. Just on that final point, I think the heartening bit was I didn't sit there and watch that and think this Ulster side are much, much better than us. I think all of us coming away thinking, well, actually, a bit more composure in places. I think we got turned over in 2 consecutive mauls. Those type of things. So it doesn't feel like we're a million miles away from turning those into narrow defeats into a win. In terms of like the players that you brought in, the point you just made, Dan, about, I think you've got to have consistency where you can in those kind of replacement selections as well, particularly at 12. So I guess what I'd like to see now is if Ben Thomas isn't available, Emmanuel plays 12.
Yeah.
We're not kind of going, oh, we'll bring Jennings in for one, we'll bring Steph in for another, we're going, actually, if we want the replacement 12 to play in the same style as Ben Thomas, our first choice, then they need the confidence that you're going to get that game. That's going to be the time that if we're struggling at tight head, Cowell will be the one that would step in, and just give those players now, between now and the end of the season, the opportunity. Because I think that's the difference. I mean, Leinster are incredible. It's a machine. Everybody who comes in knows exactly what their role is. They are not carbon copy, but it doesn't change Leinster's style of play at all. It's hugely impressive what they do, and it's obviously that goes through the age grades and academy structures to kind of go, this is what a Leinster player looks like in this position. And we had that, I think, under Jockey, about knowing what a Cardiff player looks like. But I think if you're chopping and changing too much, you're not giving players that settled moment to do that. And obviously you're going to have injuries and you're going to have to move people around anyway. But I think what I'd like to see between now and the end of the season is, when Thomas isn't available, Emmanuel gets the opportunity. We've obviously got Winnett and Beetham now competing at fullback for that position, and we've got loads of wingers, but none of them are fit. So I think, looking at where we want to be, it feels like the time to bring in a couple of those younger players and give them. I think particularly Steph Emmanuel, give him his run now at 12. I don't think Jennings would have brought anything different. If that ball had gone to Jennings from Basham, it wouldn't have been a try, because Emmanuel's pace seemed pretty impressive. I know Bernacott came from a long way, but didn't catch him really. So I think you've got to do it now, because we're going to need them, and we're not going to need them only this season, but next season as well. So you might as well give them the opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. That's an excellent point on the consistency, how different that side looked from that Exeter team. Maybe a reflection on how badly some of them played Exeter a little bit, but yeah, you would have liked to have. You need to develop combinations beyond just the starting pair, and that's the way to do it, is to trust these guys to come in every time.
And in Belfast as well, Dan. In Belfast, against a big physical Ulster backline, they looked. I mean, we weren't very tall, but in the backline, but they looked enormous, and both their wingers were physical and running directly. Their back row was running directly, and broadly, I thought we handled it okay, considering the size difference. And you're going to get that probably wherever we go. We're so looking forward to South Africa, but we seem to handle it all right. I think the first try, they got a bit of momentum, and we just started falling off tackles, and they just pick and go, and we ran out of steam. But you look at who Emmanuel was playing against and who was coming down his channel, and he dropped off a few, but you need that experience, because that's the size you're going to be competing against internationally, certainly.
Ford, you mentioned the attack a little bit earlier. There was one 3-word thought from Rob who said goal line issues persist. Obviously, there were some nice moments, as you said, but it's still not like you don't have confidence in that attack necessarily going into every game. Where do you think it's not quite clicking for us at the moment?
I think, to put it bluntly, it's not having a proper attack coach is kind of killing us. And obviously, a lot of people have theorised that block one, where our attack looked a lot better, was kind of Sherratt's playbook already set, and then we've kind of been sussed out from that and not really worked on anything from there. I did also see on social media, for example, for a game like Saturday, someone was saying that not having Ben Thomas kind of kills us a bit. I think the way he links up with players, if you pinpoint the Ospreys game, he was one of the players who came out with a kind of positive reception of how he performed in a pretty dire game. And it was kind of the runs he was making, the link play he was making. I think obviously Steph Manuel's a very good player. When he has played, he's looked comfortable considering he's still 19 years old, I believe. And granted, I think Ben Thomas wasn't getting the same kind of run of games at 19 years old as he is, but it's a work in progress for Steph. I think he probably would have learned a lot from a game like Saturday, but there's certainly a difficulty with we have the odd game where it feels like the wingers don't even touch the ball. We don't even get the ball out to the wingers. And you see that with sometimes where, particularly in block one, it was Tom Bowen would have an absolute stormer one week, and then week after it'd be a very quiet game. Not that he played particularly badly, but just wouldn't see any of the ball. And I feel like Saturday was another game where you didn't really see much of Tom Bowen with ball in hand, and you kind of think in a game like that, kind of getting him even on the counter attack would have been huge. I think it was the nature of the game. I heard someone in the crowds as well, an Ulster fan, talk about how they've had Mike Lowry for years, who's kind of that dangerous small runner from either wing or fullback, and kind of they saw a similarity between Tom Bowen, but you kind of didn't get to show the Ulster fans the kind of Tom Bowen that we've been raving about this year. But yeah, I think a proper attack coach was set way better foundation. And you'd like to think there's going to be a lot to work on now with, is it 3 weeks or 4 weeks to Leinster? I think there's a chance now to kind of suss things out a bit better, because for me, the Leinster game's now kind of a must-win game.
Kind of linked to that, Simon, a little bit with the attacking thing is obviously Tim Basham and Alan Lawrence got the nod in the back row, with Lawrence wearing 6 and Basham 8, although there was a little bit of chopping and changing between the two of them at scrum time. For a long time, we sort of bemoaned Cardiff's lack of carriers, and then we've picked 2 carriers in the back row. What did we make of how they got on as a duo on Saturday?
Yeah, it was a bit of a surprise, wasn't it? The numbers on the back in terms of where I don't think I've seen Big Al play 6. Certainly not much this season. He's obviously been an 8 for the last, certainly for the rest for this season. But I thought they went okay. I thought we used Basham really well. There was a couple of times where off a line out we got the ball into midfield, and usually it's Alan Lawrence standing there a little bit static, getting the ball and trying to punch a hole. But I think this time we disguised Basham a bit better. He kind of came in on an angle and came back in, cut back in, and got the ball and made a bit of ground. So I think that you can do that with him that you can't necessarily do with Alan Lawrence, because he's a bit quicker on his feet and can step. I thought they both had good games. I mean, Alan Lawrence, you don't necessarily notice a lot of what he does, but he's just there physically. Made good ground off the back of the scrum. I thought the scrum went really well actually on Saturday. Again, it held its own, won a few penalties, got a shove on a couple of times. But again, Basham was there for Emmanuel's try, really good kind of offload. I think it was Al Lawrence offloaded to him, I think.
Yeah.
To go through that gap and to be alert enough then to pass the ball inside for the finish. So yeah, I thought it went well. I agree with you, Dan. I think they did seemingly chop and change as to who was playing 8 and who was playing 6. I don't think the numbers on the back necessarily meant anything. But I think you can put any of those in the back row. I thought Dan Thomas had a good game as well. I think he was an absolute nuisance for most of the game as well, which I think really helps us. But as you say, whether it's Botham or Basham or Mann or whoever, I think there's a consistency with that back row in terms of the type of players they are. When we had Thomas Young as an out-and-out kind of 7 fetcher, Tyro type player, you brought somebody in that wasn't that then, like a Dan Thomas, and it kind of changed the setup. I think all of that back row now are not interchangeable, but it comes back to that point of consistency. You know what they're going to do. You can play both of them at 6 or 7. You get the similar type of performance if you play Mann at 6 or 7, or if you play Dan Thomas at 6 or 7, or Basham. So yeah, I thought it went well. I think Basham's really started to grow into the squad and grow in that importance. And I think he needs a few more games, but wouldn't surprise me entirely if there was injuries in the back row for Wales, that they take a look at him in even into the training camp, because I think he adds something. He seems to have got rid of that silliness, should we say, that gives away a yellow card or something like that at the moment, touch wood. Yeah, it was good.
I asked the question a little bit because absolutely agree that they teamed up well. There was that little pop pass from Lawrence to Basham for the try. It was sort of reminiscent of watching like Faletau and Tipuric together at their best, like for Wales, and how they kind of complemented each other. And there was a lot of focus on Faletau and a lot of focus on Lawrence, and then you got the quicker guy popping up on his shoulder to take advantage of that. I just wonder whether Fordey saying about that we didn't get the ball to Bowen a lot. I think what we didn't have in that back row was what James Beaufort and Alex Mann brings, is that they're quite comfortable out wide and linking the sort of that outside centre channel in phase play. That they all three of them were very narrow. I don't know whether that was by design or none of them. I think Basham could do that job out wide, but obviously you also want to get his hands on the ball as much as possible in the centre of the pitch as well. But I think that was something for the coaches to consider with that back row, that having that little bit of extra punch is great first up, but we missed out a little bit where we didn't have the extra body out wide. I think that's why we kicked quite a lot in the wide channel when we did go wide, and Sheedy and Millard both boot the ball quite a few times to nudge it through. And I also wonder whether we lost a little something in terms of that extra presence at the breakdown then, where you're trying to keep Lawrence and Basham on their feet a bit more. We got turned over probably more than we have this season on the floor. And I think you just maybe miss a little bit of extra dog of somebody who's just there really to put their head in awkward positions rather than carry the ball. But I think I'd like to see more of those two together if that was an option. But just something for the attack coach to consider is exactly how they're going to be together. I thought they were just maybe slightly too close together at times during the game, but it's something to consider going forward.
I think it's a good point, Dan. And it was frustrating that I think there was I can't remember who made the break. I think Basham might have made the. I know he ended up with the ball, but
was it the Evan Lloyd one off the line out? Was it the Evan Lloyd?
That was it. And then as soon as we got that ball back, we kicked.
Yeah.
And I was just we've made ground. We've broken their defence. Surely then it's like we at least one more phase, two more phase before you do that. And I think I don't know why we've talked a lot this season about when we kick and when we don't. And there are times when we're absolutely on the money with it. I think Emmanuel put in a great little kind of grubber kick in the second half that pinned them to the corner. But there's those type of moments where I'm thinking, well, if you're going to do it, if you're going to kick to put them under pressure in terms of a line out. We're kicking to compete, and we're nowhere near that competition then. We've done it a couple of times this season when we've turned ball over and then we've kicked it away. And it's kind of, we'll just hold it for a bit. Let's see what can happen rather than, trying that kick pass. I think there were a couple of times where we just overran rucks as well. I don't know whether it's surprise or what, but we just seemed to, there was one where everyone just ran straight past the ruck rather than, trying to move the man that was turning the ball over. So I think, we talked about it earlier. There's just those moments where a little lack of accuracy, a bit more thought, a bit more composure, and we're really putting pressure on teams.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes we kick to avoid being turned over at a breakdown. We look up and see the numbers are matched up maybe as 3-on-3, and we've got like a small midfield, and we're like, oh, we'll just nudge the ball in behind because otherwise we're going to get tackled and just lose it on the floor here. And yeah, that's not a particularly positive way of playing. Fordey, Gwyn on Reddit asked after Johan Lloyd popped up on the wing, where is Johan Lloyd's best position in this team, and is he falling into the same utility back role as at Scarlet? So what did you make of him on the wing? I suppose is another question involved in that as well.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting decision. I think there were a lot of kind of raised eyebrows when they saw the starting lineup announced on Friday and seeing him pop up on the wing. But I thought he played quite well. He's pretty good on the kick chase, particularly from kickoff. Kind of probably something he's not been kind of used to doing, is chasing kickoffs. I think it's his first game on the wing since May 2023, starting a game, that is. I have that written down on my notes. So kind of was long gap from start on the wing. But he played quite different to kind of what I expected in terms of it probably wasn't the Johan that we're used to seeing this season. But I think he came off his wing quite well at times, and there was a lovely kick he put in just before half time where we had a scrum in our own 22, and kind of he was just pinned on his right on the right wing, and kind of with a right footed kick there, I think he got the ball up to halfway, which was really really impressive. I think I touched upon like earlier in the season that he's a really good option off the bench because he can play all these positions. And I know he covered 12, I think, later on in the game, and he's obviously covered 15 before this season. I'm not actually entirely sure what his best position is. But I think realistically, in terms of depth, you can't not be considering him mainly as a 10. I think he's pretty much on the record of saying he sees himself as a 10. But he also said in the press conference that he's happy to play anywhere for Cardiff. So it's a difficult one. I do feel that number 22 shirt is kind of nailed down for him, certainly at the moment. And particularly when we get to kind of the business end of the season, you got to think the amount of minutes Sheedy puts in, you're going to have to slot in more at 10 as much as possible, especially if there's potential injuries to Sheedy. I think it would be not silly, but I think shoehorning him into a winger or even fullback right now would probably be a bit costly if there is then like an injury to Sheedy. And he plays, so many weeks now, especially with Sheedy not in the Wales squad. He used to play so many weeks now on the wing and then suddenly slot in back at 10. It's kind of not the greatest thing for momentum. But I think at the end of the day, it's a really good option to have that kind of utility back option. And as long as he's happy to do it, I think, why not?
I did wonder whether he should be kicking to touch as well off some penalties, because he's got a bigger boot than Sheedy has. And there was a couple, we always know that there's times when Sheedy can hit it and it just, it's perfect. And there's others, unfortunately, more often where you always think you could have had a few more meters there. There's times when he tries to get a few more meters and kicks it dead or doesn't get it out. But I just thought on Saturday there were a couple of times where I'm like, you've got him on the pitch. He's got a bigger boot. If you've got a penalty around halfway, why doesn't he kick for touch? Because you're going to go deeper into the 22. So I just wonder whether there's something about using him as well, if he's on the pitch, to go, okay, it comes back to kind of Sheedy having the, the confidence to go, you can get this further than me. There you go. Why don't you have a crack at it?
Yeah, I bet there was the only person more gutted the Callum Sheedy that Sheedy wasn't in the Wales squad was Johan Lloyd when that squad came out, because he was eyeing up a good few starts at 10 there over the next few months, and now he's not going to. But I would like to see him at 10 for. I agree with Fordey. He's still a 10 for me. He's still in that squad as a 10. Saturday was obviously a very. I don't think anyone could have predicted the amount of wingers that we were suddenly without, like from 3 weeks ago where we had 6 or 7, and now suddenly we were scraping the barrel. But I would like to see Lloyd back at 10 for at least one of the South Africa games, because I think that those are the sort of games where he will really thrive on a hard and fast track, and the game which is they're generally a little bit more unstructured down there. You can see when he gets there, he's always looking for space. And he bounces around so well. The other thing I think to mention about Lloyd is he's still only 24. I think people feel like he's like a lot older because he's been around for a long time, but he's still got a lot of growing to do. He's got a lot of experience to get, and Sheedy at 30 odd now, he's not going to. Over the next year or two, he's not going to be able to play every single game like he has at the moment, like every minute of every game, pretty much. So, yeah, I still think like even in the short term, particularly in mid term, he will be a fly half for us, and that's where he'll play. No more major questions other than Simon. I don't know whether there was any other standout performers for you for Saturday that we haven't mentioned.
No, I think broadly it was a okayish performance. I think everybody tried their best. If you consider that, Johan Lloyd wasn't a winger, he wasn't shown up particularly in that position. I think Cam Winnett's looked like he hadn't played for a while. A couple of he seemed to kind of step into contact recently rather than stepping. When he first came in, that little step would take him away, but he seems to be stepping towards rather than stepping away. So I wonder, he's going to need the game time over the next few weeks because there's a real competition now. I said before I wasn't too sure about Beetham. He seems to have taken that 15 role and is growing into it. So probably for the first time since he came through, Cam's feeling a bit of, well, will I get picked next week? And that how does a player respond to that? So I think I just gutted that Sebastian didn't score a try. He was so close. He had 3 players on his back for Mulders, but only other thing I'd add is I thought Holly Davidson had a good game, which I don't. We often criticise referees for, particularly in Belfast, where the crowd can get on your back. I thought she had a really great game, really even-handed about stuff, very clear with what she wanted from players. There's always a few penalties where you're like, well, I'm not quite sure about that, but she's really decisive as well in terms of, she was really clear with that last try, what she had seen, and wasn't really going to get, and not that Adamson tried to sway her in any way, but it's, really clear, this is what I've seen. You've got to tell me that I haven't seen what I think I've seen in terms of the scoring. We criticise referees a lot, so I think it's nice to be able to say, actually, I thought it was a good performance. And you didn't necessarily notice her a lot, which a lot of referees, you notice a lot because whistle, it's a game where there are lots of infringements, generally rugby. But actually, it was a pretty smooth, anonymous performance in a good way. So, why not say nice things about a referee even though we lost?
No, I have to say I agree with that. I did make a note that I would bring it up if it came up, and there was 1 or 2 comments I think on Blue Sky about people not happy about the penalty we conceded when we were in the red zone towards the end, and they turned us over under the 6. But my main focus at that point was just calling our attack all sorts of names because we didn't manage that. If we were managing our attack well, and then you get maybe not quite supporting his own body weight over the ball, and you sort of feel a bit miffed, but I never really felt like we were going anywhere at that point anyway, so it didn't really bother me too much. Fordey, any standout performance from you that we think we haven't mentioned, or any more points on the game?
I thought I'd just add to kind of the Sebastian comment that I thought he really got the upper hand on Angus Bell at the scrum, which was positive, especially I think it was Wainwright had got the upper hand on Bell in the fixture in Europe in December. So it's kind of as good as he is at sidestepping Angus Bell, we win in the scrum department against him. I thought Evan Lloyd had quite a strong game as well. But yeah, I think kind of all I've got to add from there.
I think, Dan, if you look at where we got turned over in the 75th minute and compare it to Ulster's try, the difference in intent and pace is really evident. I know they'd made a break, but it's still close range stuff. Picking up, coming onto the ball at pace, getting that clear out quickly, getting the ball up. We all season we've just been laboured in that kind of 2 or 3 meters from the line, and we do score, but there's just that difference in intent. When Ulster got into that area, it was pick, drive, clear out, bodies everywhere, very easy to make yards, and I think that's that intensity we seem to lack when we get to that point. We're picking and driving rather than looking back at players coming onto the ball in pace.
Cool, right, well that's that game done. It obviously brings the fixture block to a close as well, as I mentioned earlier. 10 games in 10 weeks, a roller coaster of a fixture block as well. Seems like ages ago was that Zebra game now, a mini lifetime ago really. But in that time, we've qualified out of the Challenge Cup pool, had a slightly disappointing festive derby period, but 2 pretty big wins away at Zebra and then home to Benetton last week. Fordey, how do you assess the sort of block as a whole, looking back on the last 2.5 months or so?
I think overall quite disappointing. I think we've come on this podcast quite a few times complaining a lot after certain games in a way that we didn't in the first fixture block, which is really frustrating. Naturally, there's been tougher games in this block, but I think, we're not kind of as buzzing when talking about some of the games as we were before. I touched upon it before as well, that I think quite a bit needs to be done before this Leinster game. because I think if we carry on playing the way we are now, the cracks are going to open even wider, because I think there's clearly been a bit of stagnation since the first fixture block. And I think, yeah, if we don't sort something sooner or later, then I just worry it's going to be a repeat of last season with kind of us finishing ninth again. So, yeah, but at the end of the day, still some very good wins there. So got to take some positives from it as well.
Simon, what's your sort of general feeling on that fixture block?
I'd agree with that in terms of it feels disappointing. We spoke before Christmas. A good Christmas would have been important for us, and we didn't have a good Christmas. So that is a big kind of stain on this fixture block, really, because those are the games that you think, actually, of all the games you're going to play and pick up wins and losing at home to the Scarlets, you start to question about where we are. But we've kept going. Ground out a win against Treviso, a competitive away on Saturday. We knew that this last fixture block is incredibly tough. So I agree that I think the Leinster game's really important. We've got to win our home games now to have any chance. I think the URC statisticians don't fancy us finishing the top 8. I think they put out a table that had us at like 43% to finish in the top 8 and had us at 9th. So it will be a shame if it fades away, but we've only got ourselves to blame, really, because we're in a good position and we've lost games that we shouldn't have lost. But there we are. You are where we are, and you've got to go again. If we can sort out some things in the next few weeks, we're going to take on a Leinster side that, their thirds and their fourths have beaten us at the Arms Park previously quite comfortably. We beat them pre-season, so we're already one up psychologically. I don't know what level of Leinster side we ended up beating pre-season, but we won. So I'm just looking at the mess of Welsh rugby and thinking, well, whatever happens, got to enjoy those last few home games and see where we are at come the end of the season.
I think it's like I don't disagree at all that it's been a frustrating fixture block, and I think it's quite mad that we're still 5th. We're genuinely 5th as well. Nobody can actually, even though I think Bulls have got a game in hand on us, they're like 11 points back. We are currently 12 points into the playoff spots, but obviously I think we've said it on the pod quite a lot that this is all prefaced by the fact that the second half of the season is a lot tougher than the first half of the season was. Looking at the fixture block as a whole, I think it's just you can't get past that Scarlets game. That was such a disappointing defeat, that one, and I still have the feeling that we will look back on that when we're doing this pod in May and say, oh, if we'd won that one, that was the game that got away, and that would have got us into a playoff spot, or perhaps even like finishing top 5 or 6 or whatever. But it has been, other than that, it's been pretty all right. I think the win against Benetton was massive. The Challenge Cup was pretty par for the course. I think that's just about what we were aiming for, really. 2 home wins and then 2 away defeats with a much changed side. But yeah, just that Scarlets game just nags me as something which is gonna come back and get us. Gareth on Twitter sent a few questions in as at the end of the block, and sort of roughly halfway through the season. I think we've probably played slightly more than there are to come, but it feels like a halfway point, really, with the big break of the Six Nations coming up. Some of his questions, Fordey, he goes with, as a general team one, what's improved for us and what's causing concern going into second half season? I think we've covered the concern quite well with the attack and where we need to get that. But what's improved, do you think, for Cardiff over the first part of the season?
I think our set piece has definitely improved. I think we've talked on the pod a lot about going that our scrum was strong, as I've done tonight, and I don't think at times we haven't said that often before. I think we've often had quite commonly a retreating scrum. But I think even from the weekend, it's shown that sometimes our defence can be pretty good in terms of holding out. I think the Angus Bell try is just a freak try where if you watch Angus Bell, for example, the amount of All Blacks that he kind of runs past, he's got a pretty hefty highlight reel of. I don't think it's a huge slight. It's disappointing on Cam Winnett to kind of get stepped like that, but I don't think it's a huge slight on him. And I think our defence has looked pretty strong at times, particularly if you compare it to some games last season. I think just grinding out, whether that's in attack or defence, it's such a cliche at this point that we say there's games a few years ago that we'd have lost that game a few years ago compared to this season. But I think it still really holds true. I think getting kind of those wins, like denying Benetton a bonus point, getting our last minute win against Ulster and against Edinburgh, kind of chipping away at the end. I think we're becoming a bit more of an 80-minute team at times. I don't think it's perfect, but it's certainly there's an improvement there that you can kind of see quite plain to the eye.
I think if you look at it, as Cardiff fans, we've so far had a better season than probably Benetton, Connacht, Edinburgh, Scarlets. Those are the teams that have been competing for that top 8, and we're frustrated because we felt there are games we could have won. That's where the frustration comes from, not from kind of we're expecting loads, but there are other sides on that table that have had much worse seasons than us. Even even Ulster and Munster haven't particularly been blowing hot and cold as well. So as you say, Dan, that it's slightly wild that we're still 5th. Even though we've not had a great block, but other sides are dropping points as well. The final block will be the one that tells, and unfortunately or unfortunately, we've got a tough run in. But I think there are other sides that will be other fans of other teams will be much more disappointed with how they're showing up this season than we are.
Always better to have your points on the board than be hoping that they're coming with you. I think the other area I noted down with improvement this season for us is when we kick on our own terms. I think we're a much better team in terms of how we're kicking, and then just our aerial game generally. We're getting more ball back. We're stopping the other team from getting their ball back a lot more, and that's keeping us in some of those games. I think of that Connacht game in particular, that just descended into just a massive aerial battle, and we won that. Whereas previously, I feel like we'd have made too many errors or not quite held on to enough of those balls, and that would have come back to haunt us. So we're still kicking too much, not on our own terms, and that's hampering us. But when we get that right, that balance between running and kicking right, we are a much better side. Simon, the other part of Gareth's question was around individual players who stood out for you as sort of some of the better players, and maybe an unsung hero or two as well so far this campaign.
Just on that final point, I think we're not letting sides piggyback on penalties into our 22 either as much. Like last season, we would just get 2 or 3 penalties and opposition are in our 22 and suddenly we're defending. I think we've got to be much more disciplined around halfway on either side of that as well. That means that sides aren't getting cheap kind of 22 entries. Who stood out this season? I don't know. I think across the board, I mean, Ben Thomas, I think since coming back from Wales after having a really disappointing time with Wales has been excellent. I think we talked about being a bit worried about what kind of mental shape he might be in after being a bit of a scapegoat for some of those defeats. And he's just been outstanding, really has. I think he's taken his game up to another level, how physical he is, but also really deft in terms of his passing ability. I think he's been outstanding. I think you look at McNally again. I think probably he's had an off day here and there, which has been unusual for him. But we put that down to absolute exhaustion because he's playing week in, week out. But I'd go back to players like Thornton. I think has been absolutely incredible in this block. Going into it, very much being seen as a third choice, fourth choice lock. I think he's really made a statement for pushing to be McNally's partner at times. His all-round game, I think, has been outstanding actually over the last few weeks. So I think that would be my unsung one. It was good to see Millard back on Saturday. I think he does bring something defensively for us because he is up quickly and he does catch the eye of the pass going outside and creates that kind of knock on or problem as well. So yeah, I've probably missed one because I haven't thought about that question, Dan. So I'll let you two probably thought about it a lot more than me come up with some better answers than that.
Fordey, have you got any names off the top of your head?
I think there was a bit of fear that, Alan Lawrence had a fantastic season last season. I think people were a bit wary that he probably wouldn't then back it up this season, but it's just kind of, he doesn't do anything massively flashy. He's not, going on 50-meter line breaks, but he kind of does everything we really need to get ourselves on the front foot. And I think that's massive. And I think as well, someone like Sheedy has kicked on a bit from last season. We talk about how crucial he was to kind of get us firing a bit more in attack. And it's kind of nice to see he's brought his kicking boots to an extent this season, that there's an improvement in that department. But yeah, as well, I think another one's Javan Sebastian. I think we were all a little bit worried when Litterick departed, but I think Javan Sebastian's been a kind of great little number two who's filled in when Azarati's not available, and he's a bit of a grafter. So I've really kind of been happy having him, seeing his name on the team sheet. Like, he's put in a bit of a shift this season. So yeah, that's kind of the only names I can think of at the top of my head, but I'm sure I missed someone as well.
I think what was interesting about Sheedy at the weekend, he seemed to be at times taking the ball to the line a bit more and running a bit more rather than just kind of passing it on, which I think is really good to see because he's got that in his he's got that ability to do that, not like run over the top of people, but take it to the line and offload or pass or get somebody into space. And I think we talked about this before. I'd really like to see that happening a bit more because I think he's got that ability to keep defenses guessing as well. Sometimes it's just a little bit too static, and I think people know what he's going to do. So seeing that a little bit more on Saturday was a real positive. But I agree. I think it generally is game management. He comes in for quite a lot of criticism, certainly from the people that stand around me on the terraces, which I don't really get because I think he's, every fly half has a kick that goes slightly wrong or goes sideways rather than up in the air. But generally, I thought he's steered us around pretty well, and his goal kicking has become a lot better than it was last season.
I feel like he's got a bit tougher as well. Like, there was a few comments last season. I think mainly a bit harshly because it just came from that one game where he got run over by Tuipulotu a couple of times, and suddenly his defense was terrible. But he's taken quite a few big knocks the last few weeks, and he's been bounced around, and he gets back up and dusted down. The other player, in a similar vein to Simon mentioning, Rory Thornton. Last few weeks in particular, I've quite enjoyed watching George Knott actually get around the field, and I should apologise for that. I would say I doubted him. I just straight up said he wasn't a very good signing last season. I wasn't fussed at all. But no, he's one of those guys who's come from the Dragons, and you're like, yeah, I can see why maybe the Dragons guys didn't rate him too much, because I think you need players around him who are going to do some of the flashier stuff, which obviously the Dragons haven't had previously. But in a Cardiff team where we've got those sort of players, and maybe the ones we're lacking are your glue guys who are going to, win balls at breakdown, and he's obviously a very good line-out maul operator, which suits us well. But I think defensively the last couple of weeks he's been really good as well. There was that one tackle against Benetton, which was a try saver. He made a couple of really nice defensive reads against Ulster on the weekend as well, where they were bringing a couple of layers off 9, and he's just sitting back and waiting for it. He's got that experience. So no, I've enjoyed him getting around the field, and with Thornton and Knott in particular, I think we haven't, obviously you feel the absence of a Teddy Williams, because what team wouldn't feel the absence of somebody that way? But in previous years we'd have lost one of our first or second choice second rows, and that would have been it for the season. Then we'd have just crumbled against quite a lot of packs, particularly that you look at the the size of that Racing pack that turned up, for example, and that Ulster pack still on the weekend with had some big guys in it. But we haven't. I don't think I felt at any point, other than maybe Ospreys, but that was more like an emotional thing. I think I haven't actually felt that we are being bullied by just massively bigger men here. That Ospreys one was more we're just not at the races rather than being bullied. Everyone else, I felt that we've been in a physical battle. Even if we've been slightly second best, it's been to a level where it's manageable for us rather than, think of some of those games when the South Africans came into the league and the Bulls would just be like, right, we're going direct here and we're just running over the top of them and that would be it. So, yeah, I think that's been good for our depth and with the experience of guys like Nott and Thornton as well. Hopefully that rubs off on somebody like Tom Cottle coming through, and I mentioned Sonny McKay playing for the Rags in a bit as well. Like the hopefully Gabe Williams as well, Teddy's brother in the under-20 squad. We've actually got a bit of a pipeline coming through in that position at long last, rather than just losing them all to England when we produce a sort of half decently talented second row. So that's good stuff. Question from Ben, which we touched on a bit last week as well. How many more wins to guarantee top 8? He thinks 2 and a couple of bonus points. I'd really like 3 wins because I think that definitely gets us there. I'm slightly concerned with 2 wins and a couple of bonus points leaves us once again in a position where we're like asking for other results to go our way and that sort of thing. But yeah, 3 wins would be great. And then one from Rob as well, who says, what can we hope for in SA? South Africa, obviously, we've got the 2 games at the end of the Six Nations for where we won't have our internationals, you assume, especially or particularly those who are going to play a lot for Wales. We'll touch on it a bit more close to the time, but do we go there for anything other than losing bonus points at this point?
Yeah, I think it's wishful thinking to go out there thinking we'll nab a win. And likewise, I think it might be difficult to get try bonus points, but yeah, there's probably an element there of we still have to go for it. Like you'd almost take potentially shipping 70 points if it's like 70-28 against like a team like the Bulls, so that we just get that bonus point. But yeah, I'm not particularly hopeful of a win in any scenario. But again, there was that like Bulls game last season where didn't we get a bonus point at the end for 4 tries, and we still got absolutely played off the park. I think it was good like 30-0 at half time to them, but you were still buzzing at full time because you got that bonus point. So I think that's what's to be expected. But as you touched upon earlier, you think with someone like Johan Lloyd playing at 10 in a game like that on like a hard ground, that does kind of excite me. And with some of our backs, it's probably the good timing to be playing in SA because March will be a kind of, is it autumn around then time?
Oh, you're testing my geographical knowledge now.
If only Steve was here. Steve could look on the map.
Yeah. It's certainly not as rock hard and boiling, I don't think, around that time, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's probably a good balance then. Hopefully if we get our backs firing and try and get a try bonus point. And then if we're in touch somehow within 7 points, and that's brilliant.
Who was it last season? Didn't we have 2 bonus points last season and they childishly kicked a penalty with the last kick to take it away from us? Was that last season?
It could be. I kind of like blanked the South African games out of my head, except that one where we nilled the Sharks randomly. I
think it was Stormers. It was. I don't think it mattered anyway, but no. I think it was still mathematically possible that we could make top 8, and ultimately it didn't. But I think it was Sasha Feinberg and Gomezulu just went for a penalty at the last play, and it was just incredibly childish.
The thing is about playing, from what I've seen playing those South African sides away, is they do get caught up in the moment. It's not like playing Leinster away, who will just brush you, crush all spirit out of you, and keep it tight and just keep scoring tries. The South African sides do throw the ball around. They are, even if they're 30 points up, they still want to go and play wide. And that leads to opportunities, I think. In a lot of the games we've played out there, we've scored 2 or 3 tries, got a bonus point because they don't stop playing. They don't kind of look to kind of crush your spirit as much as maybe some of the other URC sides. So I think there will be opportunities, but it's daunting, isn't it, to go to the two sides that we've got and think, how are you going to do that? Because it's the turnaround as well in that period.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks, and I mean, fingers crossed that there's not too many injuries in the Wales squad. Looking at a couple of our players, you mentioned earlier about Basham being next cab off the rank potentially, and I think there's a few more like that across the squad as well. If we go down there with any more of a depleted squad, then we're struggling big time. But that's all to
At
come.
one point, you just call off a game.
Yeah.
Actually, it's
If we just don't
dangerous
go.
to take some of our academy players down there.
What are they going to do if we just don't get on the plane? But that's all to come anyway. We shall look at that fixture block a bit closer to the time towards the end of the Six Nations period. That pretty much finishes us from Cardiff on-field stuff, unless there's any more from you two gentlemen about any more the last few weeks. Good stuff. We shall move on to the news then. One piece of sort of on-field-ish news. Rags loosehead Ben Murphy is today gone on loan to Harlequins for a short-term period. It's going to cover their 4 Prem Cup games over the next few weeks. Good opportunity for him to play at that level. Former Cardiff Met captain and has played a couple of times for the Rags so far this season. So hopefully that benefits him and us in the run-in when he comes back to us as well. And then off-field bits, there was the Cardiff Athletic Club AGM last Wednesday. Me and Tony plodded along for a night of fun, as it always is. General headlines were that, and there was a question in as well from Neil on Twitter who asked, what can we do to stop Y11? Doesn't look like the Athletic Club's going to be the route for that one. They're looking at granting a long-term lease for the Arms Park to the Welsh Rugby Union, despite the Welsh Rugby Union obviously selling us. The Welsh Rugby Union would then sublease the ground to, at the moment, Y11 or whoever ends up as being the official confirmed buyer of the club if Y11 were to fall through. I think that'll be disappointing for some Cardiff fans to hear, because there may have been a feeling that if we could have banded together as a rugby section and blocked it. But when you look at it from a sort of general business sense and from an athletic club sense as well, it makes sense for them to protect themselves by taking the long-term lease with the WRU rather than with the owner of the rugby club. I think it also makes sense in that the WRU are a lot more open to baking in a sort of protection around the brand name, around Cardiff Rugby name, playing in blue and black at the Arms Park, which isn't in the short-term lease that the WRU have got at the moment to 2028 because of the rust nature of it. But Keith Morgan, the Athletic Club chairman, was very clear that if anything was to change with that sort of becoming Cardiff Ospreys or Car Sprays or whatever in the next few months, that would significantly negatively affect their chances of getting a long-term lease at the Arms Park. So there's that protection there. It also links in with the WRU obviously being quite a key partner in any major redevelopment of the Arms Park going forward, with the concrete not in great nick under that south stand, which is linked to the Millennium Stadium, and Glammore's Gap still being there as well. You wonder whether they might take the chance to address all of those issues in one big redevelopment go. And then I thought just generally at the Athletic Club, I've not always been a massive fan of the Athletic Club, the way it's run necessarily, and some of the decisions taken. But I thought Keith Morgan spoke really well about the sort of ecosystem of Cardiff Rugby at the moment, the 2 teams, 1 club, how the RFC are perfectly positioned to bring through these young players and see them on to the first team, and that works well for them. It keeps them competitive and supplies the next generation of blue and blacks, and how the first team is benefiting from that. So that was good to hear him talk so passionately about that. And he also echoed the views of Lynn Glaister, obviously friend of the pod and CF10 chair as well, who, you know, Abby Tierney as WRU CEO takes a lot of stick online, I think, in particular, and there's a lot of people that don't trust her. But those 2 people independently have sort of come out and said that she's spoken well when they've met with her separately as well, not together, and that each time they've asked about the Cardiff name and the colours and staying at the Arms Park, and Abby's answer has been yes, yes, and yes. That was a key element of selling the club on both occasions. So yeah, I don't think it'll be what some want to hear in terms of the Y11 stuff, but the general takeaway I took from the meeting was that I think ultimately there might be a level of apathy towards the takeover, that nobody will trust them, and that, we certainly won't on this podcast, and I think most of us online will never trust Y11 as owners, but that maybe just with the threat of there being a team being lost and where Welsh Rugby is at the moment, that it might be for the best to just suck it up for now, get our credentials of the brand name and the history stuck into the lease to protect it that way. And then at some point, Y11 will move on and the club will continue beyond that. Simon, I don't know if you've got anything in particular
No,
to
I
come in.
mean,
I know you haven't been on in the last few weeks where we've discussed the Y11 stuff, but
yeah, I mean, I think I'm now treating it as like a hostile takeover
yeah,
that we need to think as a fan base what we do to make it as uncomfortable for them as possible. It's really hard because the power is all with the union and with Y11. It's not, we don't really have that much power. I think keeping whether it's like the 11-minute protest, the 11th minute protest, or whatever going, because just think we've got to make it as uncomfortable for them as possible, and make it clear that um, we don't feel that they are suitable owners for the club. I think you know it, it's what the way Y11 have acted, but whether it was Y11 or Martin Ryan's bid, they both signed up to the same offer that the union was making about them running the rugby side, and the others don't. So, I've said before, I wouldn't trust any ownership that came in on that deal anyway. I think we've had our fingers burnt with Helford, so I think it's a healthy scepticism. And even if they fix the leak on the south terrace roof that just dripped on me constantly during the Benetton game, I did move, and then the people I was with kept bumping me back into this point where the rain was coming in. But you're right, Dan. That ground is starting. It's been creaking for years. It needs to get. We need to do something with it, but I'd rather it wasn't Y11 and the WRU doing it. But I think that's where we are, and I think we've just got to make as much noise as we can, continue to oppose it, and even if they get the deal over the line, I don't think that's the end of us making it clear that we don't want them as owners of the club. And it'll be really interesting to see what happens next, because if they do become owners, there will be an expectation that they meet supporters, because we have that expectation through the trust, that there is that engagement with the fan base, whether it's through a board place, or through the trust, or through fan. It's not like we will be quite happy with them being silent partners. And if they go into those, they need to front up. They'll own the club. They need to front up and talk to us, which I think is right and proper. And as you said, Dan, I don't think they won't get an easy ride from us. And no owners that came in now would get an easy ride. I think because of what we've been through, we're quite clear that I think a lot of us are quite clear about we expect owners to be engaged with the fan base and listening and responding, not just distant.
yeah, and I think that's to answer Neil's question about what can we do to stop Y11. I think the answer is nothing really in terms of like actually putting a stop to it, but we can continue to make it clear that like they will. I've said this a few times on the pod, and I don't want to keep hammering Ospreys fans and stuff because it's not a great time for them, but they've had an easy ride there in terms of they've done stuff which have harmed that club, in like looking to buy other clubs and looking to merge them and stuff, and there's never really been much backlash from the Ospreys fans. That will not be the case at Cardiff. Like, you will not get away with fucking around at Cardiff, basically, because we're not always, we don't always travel in huge numbers and in like wear our colours and chant. Like, people always say, oh, Cardiff don't travel and stuff. I think generally that's not the way we go about stuff. We're not necessarily the loudest fan base in the world, but give us something to get annoyed about, and we will be happily get annoyed about quite a lot of stuff. Like, and Y11 are like a really obvious target for that. So yeah, I agree. Like, they will have to regularly meet with supporters. They won't get away with just being this sort of weird background entity that doesn't really do much, and they will have to be aware that their actions are being more scrutinised now and will continue to be. I mean, if they were to buy the pod, I would happily set up a weekly segment on this podcast, which is just us all saying we still don't trust you, like till the end of time, for like no apparent reason.
Do you know you just said if they were to buy the pod?
Oh, did I say the pod? I meant the
I was like, well,
although,
hang on a minute, Dan. You know, we've all got mortgages and
Uh,
rent to
my
pay. Let's
my
not be
morals
hasty.
are available for purchase. Just
You know something we don't.
I will take that. I mean, but that is the other thing I was going to come on to say as well as that we mentioned at the meeting was there's still these rumours about nefarious deals, and there may well have been something offered to them to entice them to bid, but I think there's still a train of thought that they WRU maybe have turned down a better offer from the other from the Martin Ryan led consortium to accept the Y11 one just because it's easier for them. But something Keith mentioned at the meeting on Wednesday, which remains true, is that Y11 are backed by £5 billion worth of private equity funds, and ultimately, you know, there's some Martin Ryan and those Hollywood guys and stuff are wealthy individuals, but they don't have £5 billion sitting behind them, and the long-term security that £5 billion offers you is a lot more than what most people can put up. So, I do think that there is still elements of the bid that need to be properly looked at, and we need to understand if there was anything offered to Y11 to entice them to bid. But when it comes to weighing up the two of them, as exciting as the Martin Ryan one was, and we all agree that there was a lot of good plans in there, ultimately that can be trumped by £5 billion. I think that's where the bid
Dan,
was.
I think the WRU were always going to do what's in the best interest of the WRU. We know that. That's how they have operated, possibly for decades, if not longer. If Y11 had not come to the table, there was no decision to be made like this. If they'd looked at it and gone, they've looked at it obviously from a business point of view. That's absolutely within their rights to do, you know, in terms of who they're funded by as well. But if they had not come to the table, the Ospreys wouldn't be in the position that they currently are. We wouldn't be going, we're not really happy with this and we don't think they've got the best interest in. And I don't trust the WRU in terms of the actions they make, but also it could have been a situation where they didn't have to make this decision because Y11 went, no, actually, I don't think this is in the best interest of the Ospreys at all. It's not, you know, the business case doesn't work. They didn't have to do what they did. And I think, you know, people are rightly angry at the union. That anger needs to be equally, if not more, at the owners of the Ospreys for stepping forward to bid to enable this situation. If they hadn't, this situation wouldn't have occurred. We'd have had four privately owned teams, and then it's down to, you know, probably down to franchises, really, isn't it? In terms of those three. They're not calling them franchises, are they? I don't know what they're called.
I think they call them a different name every week, to be honest. Depends what side of the bed Richard
bidding for those
would
three
get
teams,
out of.
those three areas, those three franchises, whatever. So, you know, I can understand anger at the union, but I didn't expect anything less. My anger is probably more at, well, those owners made that decision. They didn't have to make that decision. They have, and they should, you know, own that, which I don't think they've done to Ospreys fans at all. I don't think that Y11 have owned that decision at all with Ospreys fans at the moment. But who knows what the future will bring.
Fordey, I know you're not as tuned into the business side necessarily. I don't know if there's ever been a YouTube compilation of best owners necessarily in rugby, but that you've put out. But have you got any sort of general thoughts on what the Y11 and what's happened the last few weeks with the Cardiff ownership?
Obviously, naturally, yeah, very disappointing. But obviously not just us, but for I think a lot of people involved in Welsh rugby, particularly Ospreys fans. And I agree a lot with what Simon was saying in terms of I think we need to be kind of as much of a nuisance as possible towards Y11. Hearing some of the rumours coming out, I do worry as Richard Collier-Keywood just sold them a complete pack of bullshit about what's going to happen in the next few years, because a lot of it just doesn't really add up for me in terms of, you know, even from what Y11 seem to be getting out of this, and the whole, the club being run by the WRU, but then them coming in as kind of the owners, but with no real responsibility for the proper running of the club. It all just doesn't really add up for me. But yeah, completely agree that not supportive of it at all, and kind of must do everything to be as much of a nuisance as possible.
The rumours slowly eke out that there may be a little bit of compromise on that whole WRU running of the rugby department and stuff. I don't think that's being driven by Y11 and Cardiff at all. I think that's mostly being driven by particularly the Dragons and a little bit the Scarlets as well, and we'll probably just ride along on their coattails a little bit. But yeah, I agree that that's going to be a real clincher, I think, for Y11. It's like a first big test for them, really. If they come in and they've immediately signed us up to basically be in WRU's rugby department, then it's like, oh well, you've basically failed us the first opportunity. But if they come in and manage to sort of tweak that deal a little bit and take it back closer to what the current PRA is, which was more acceptable in terms of like obviously ideally we wouldn't have any link to the WRU at all, we just stand on our own 2 feet, but there has to be some element of collaboration and give and take there a little bit with the way that it works in terms of the WRU and Team Wales being the money pot and the natural progression from the club game to the test game. But yeah, I think that's an interesting first battle, but still it remains the case that we're still in this exclusive period of them bidding for the club, and nothing is signed and confirmed yet. So with Welsh Rugby, until it's official, even 2 weeks after it's officially announced, you still never know exactly what's going to come out. So we shall wait and see on that one. We may be back with an emergency pod during the Six Nations. You never know. And one final piece of news then, a bit more friendly news, positive for the history of the club. Cardiff officially launched the timeline of events for the 150th anniversary of Cardiff Rugby Club this year. The 2026-27 season is when they'll officially get onto it. But obviously, this year is the 150th year. They've called it the club's. I've been practicing this today, so it's the sesquicentennial season, which I think the general response on social media was, "What the hell is sesquicentennial?" I did like Alid on Twitter, who has decided to call it the sexy centennial season. So I think we'll stick with that as well. But the stuff coming out includes 150 season membership, the launch of a 150 club. There'll be a 150th anniversary rugby ball competition and community program delivered to primary schools, a dinner, a commission of portraits of Sir Gareth Edwards and of the Cardiff Greatest 15 painting, a commemorative grog, a special edition jersey, and celebratory fixtures for both Cardiff RFC and Cardiff Rugby, which piqued my interest quite a lot as well. I wonder who we end up playing in those ones. There's also the club have announced today a 150th anniversary book, which has been put together by friend of the pod David Allen, as well as historian Gwyn Prescott. The final 2 chapters are written by a guy who is incredibly handsome. That's the only insight I've really got, but he looks quite a lot like me. But Steve Coombs of this parish also involved in writing that as well. But from the previews I've seen, it does look a very good piece of work. But obviously, particularly those final 2 chapters. They've also announced that there's a anniversary committee has been set up as well, with a bunch of people involved in that. So we shall keep up with that as the year goes on. Right, if you're enjoying what you're listening to at this point of the pod, please feel free to like and subscribe on whatever podcast platform you're on. Leave us a review as well. If you're watching us on YouTube, then like the video and subscribe to the channel. The Rap Guys got plenty of good stuff coming out of the Six Nations. They've done their Six Nations preview this week, and there's new pods going up all the time as well across the sister channel, the Global Gain Line too. So get involved in that one. We'll move on to Rags Corner then. A disappointing Rags Corner this one. Cardiff kicked off their SRC Cup campaign going up to North Wales on Saturday. Derry Cross opened the scoring in the first couple of minutes, and then I think Cardiff went home after about the 20th minute as they lost 34-5 at the hands of RGC. Not a lot of positives to take out of that game at all, other than Harry Tovey, who does some good work on the media side for the Rags. He mentioned singled out Sonny McCabe as making good impact off the bench. The under-18 second row is at Whitchurch, I think. He was name checked by Josh Turnbull when he came on this pod start of the season before last as well. So there's obviously a bit of hype around him as a second row slash. I think he's played a little bit at blindside as well, which is good to see. Hopefully the Rags get back on the horse quickly as Newport come to the Arms Park on Saturday. A slightly earlier 2 p.m. kickoff to fit it in before Wales play England later in the day. Pathway stuff, the under-18s are back after their fallow week last weekend. They're away at Dragons at Ustramanog on Sunday afternoon. Go in for the 100% record. If they win that one, they'll have gone through the whole regular season unbeaten before going into the final. And the under-16s have started their campaigns as well. Cardiff under-16 North are the first ones in action. They drew 12-all with Scarlets under-16 East last Wednesday evening. Right, our final part of the pod today then. We shall have a quick look ahead at the Six Nations, which obviously kicks off for Wales on Saturday evening. Away at England at Twickenham, a 20-5 kickoff. I assume it's on ITV because I think all England home games are on ITV, yeah. So just tune in for kickoff would be my advice there, really. Avoid the adverts and stuff. Wales then, the fixtures go France home and Scotland home before the fallow week. Just the one of those this year, of course. And then Ireland away before Italy home on Super Saturday. Fordey, just generally, right before we focus in on the Cardiff stuff, I don't know, is there any hope for a successful Six Nations tournament for Wales? And what does that look like, I guess, is a question. What would be a successful Six Nations for Steve Tandy's side?
I think realistically, right now with kind of everything that's going on in Wales with, wasn't it 18 games on the trot, losing, only beaten Japan twice. I think as long as there's a clear game plan, some kind of consistency and some half decent 80-minute performances, I think that would realistically be successful. As frustrating as it sounds, I think even with 5 losses, you can still have a pretty successful tournament. But I think, very successful would be 1 win, and then 2 wins would be extremely successful. I think there's a bit more of a buzz with kind of Tandy. You get that vibe from the players compared to there was an element of hopelessness when Gatland was in charge of kind of the game plan was quite outdated and there was no real clear structure going on. But yeah, I think it pains me to say, like, even losing all 5 games, you can still take success from it. But I think that's kind of where this Welsh team is at right now, unfortunately.
Simon, I suppose similar question in terms of success. And what do we hope to see from Steve Tandy's team? What would you like them to, areas they need to, well, other than all of them, areas you need to improve in? And if there's something you could look back at the end of the tournament and say, I'm pleased that was improved, what would it be?
Yeah, all of it. I mean, we were bullied in the autumn in a lot of, and I don't mean necessarily up front, but in the backs all over the park. I just think we got beaten up. So I think you want to see a plan that's a little bit more streetwise, a little bit more, right, these are the players we've got. What can we do with them? I think players need to nail. I think you've got a question coming up, Dan, about play. I think players need to nail down positions now. If we're going with Dan Edwards at 10, there's not really any competition that's close to him at 10. I think it's a big Six Nations for him. Need to sort out inside centre because you can't chop and change between having a direct run in 12 and a more ball play in 12. It can, they're 2 different game plans. So I think need to do the basics well, need to scrummage well, need to take, line out needs to be good. It's a really tough start against 2 big, physical, quick, hard running sides. So, France can have their days where they're just off the boil. We all know that. It's a cliche, but they can have those. But I think it's just been a really tough few weeks. So, as Fordey said, to see a bit of structure, that goes from game to game, that there's a plan that we're just going to stick with it. We're not going to panic if it goes badly at Twickenham on Saturday. The players aren't, as players have been over certainly the end of Gatland's reign, singled out for criticism as, oh, that isn't working, or it's that player, and they are the four guys for it as well. But it's just where we are. I mean, if we beat Scotland, it will be hilarious. I think it's unlikely, but can you imagine if we beat? Is it still their golden generation, or is it kind of bronze now, or slightly copper? I don't know, but a dark horse every year, Scotland, but never make it. So we've got home games. I think it's really important in those home games we show up, and there's a bit of fight and a bit of spirit, and they don't necessarily have to be like one score games, but people that have gone go, oh, I'd come back. There's something there. I think if we get blown out in those 3 home games and it ends with defeat, is it Italy last, wasn't it? So,
yeah.
It ends, with a bit of a limp defeat to Italy. The least of the WRU's concerns will be selling 20,000 tickets, because there'll be a lot more. So I think financially as well, there's a need to show a bit of spirit, a bit of fight. And I think, much as I don't like the union and stopped watching international rugby a while back because of them, the coaches and the team need to be supported by the Welsh public and not kind of overly criticised, because they're in a really difficult spot at the moment, and the coaches are in a really difficult spot at the moment, and they're having to front up for decisions that aren't being made by them. So, yeah.
Fordey, which players, Cardiff or generally across the squad, do we think need to have a really big tournament if Wales are going to try and eke out a win or two?
You'd like to think someone like Alex Mann could well be penciled in for that 6th shirt. I think he had a really good autumn, so kind of building from that would be huge. You wonder whether someone like Mason Grady, now he's back from injury, I think his Welsh side's always kind of been lacking in size, and you can't say that someone like Mason Grady hasn't got the kind of size that we're crying out for at times. I wonder if he'll be penciled in for maybe that 23 shirt. I think there's plenty of options for him there. And then you wonder whether someone like Ben Thomas, is he going to be starting at 12? I think he probably doesn't get he gets a lot of shit from fans in a Wales shirt, which I think is quite unfair, because, all sorts of reasons in terms of, a pack that's often on the back foot, the kind of game plan that he was playing in, particularly when you look back at when he was playing 10 against Australia some 18 months ago. But then again, you wonder, is someone like Josh Adams maybe going to be starting regularly? And there's a lot of options. I think it's judging by the autumn before the red card, you'd think maybe Adams will be starting. And I think, again, Adams is someone who I've seen in certain circles probably got a little bit of criticism for his form in a Wales top, and you think he's been very good for Cardiff this season. I think he's always been very good for Cardiff. And then but there's that difficulty again on the international level with the state of this Welsh team of getting the ball out to the wings. But yeah, I think if Josh Adams was to have a good tournament, that would be a huge kind of confidence boost, not just for him, but for the entire team. He's such a kind of good asset, and that all-round game, even just like as a jackal threat, he's a good asset to have on the pitch. So yeah, I think those are kind of the names I pick out, but also add to that is like someone like James Botham. Kind of, you think maybe he could slot in with that back row cover, but also it's a real shame that Kieran Azarati is out, because I think it could have been a really good Six Nations for him.
Yeah, I think the Adams one, I think, is really surprising that no one really has him in their starting back three, which I get there's a lot of good players. There's a lot of competition, and Reece Ahmed is obviously a big name. Blair Murray's an incumbent there. You've got Ellis Mee in great form for the Scarlets, but I think looking at the players that have been picked, and you look at like Gabe Hamer-Webb over Rio Dyer and stuff like that, there's going to be a lot of kicking from this Wales team. I think Steve Borthwick is on record as saying he expects Wales to kick like 50 times in the game on Saturday, which is maybe a little bit over the top. But like, we're not in a position where we're playing from anywhere in our own half at the moment. We're not just going to turn up and like chuck the ball around like that. We're going to kick a lot. We're going to chase hard, and there's not many better than that than Adams. Like he's a great finisher, and he's a really intelligent player picking lines and stuff, but what he gives you a lot of as well is just like 110% effort up and down the wing, gets off the ground, makes his tackles. That's sort of, it's all well and good picking like a flashier player in somebody like Blair Murray, and he's obviously got a lot of excellent qualities when he's got the ball in hand, but ultimately there's not really much point in having those qualities if we never get the ball in his hands, because we never win the ball in the air. So yeah, I'd be very surprised if Adams wasn't heavily involved in this Six Nations, and well, starting on Saturday, I think it would be a shock if he wasn't in my book. And that might then link into Ben Thomas getting the 12 nod as well, because if we're going to kick a lot, then having he is the best kicking option at 12. I know Hawkins has played at 10 a lot for the Scarlets, but Ben Thomas is the best footballing option at 12 in that team, and I think that yeah, he does get a lot of criticism, but Fordey is absolutely bang on. Like, he's played in a system that suits him in his best position maybe twice for Wales. Like, he's got a lot of caps, but a lot of them have just been like handed out on a hit and hope basis, which Gatland was doing in the sort of the last part of his second stint there, was just basically trying anybody and hope, like flinging the wall and hoping somebody stuck in a position. So yeah, those are two major guys. I think some of the forwards as well are really on, not Cardiff, but just generally the Welsh forwards. I think Dewi Lake needs to have a massive tournament, particularly line out throwing wise. I think I've never been one in the bashing Adam Beard camp necessarily. I appreciate what he brings in terms of breakdown and set piece, but him and Jenkins as a duo, I think, need to have a really big Six Nations and really tie that pack together as the glue guys in there, because they have what it takes to be a good combination. I thought we saw the best of Dav Jenkins against New Zealand in the autumn, but we've seen them as maybe kind of two individuals operating next to each other rather than as a really good dynamic second row duo where Jenkins gets around the field and Beard then is just more head down arse up in every contact. So those are the positions I'll be looking at. Simon, if there's any players that stick out for you necessarily from around.
No, I would just
Wales?
think I agree completely on Josh Adams. It's not only the experience he brings, but he's one of the form wings at the moment in Wales. He's back scoring tries, which he'd stopped doing for a period. So I think what he brings, he's done some silly things whilst playing for Wales, unfortunately, and got yellow cards and the like. And I think that his competitiveness boils over at times. But he's been superb for us, so I don't see why he shouldn't be. It would be nice to see Gabe Hamer-Webb get a run out in one of the games, because I think it's frustrating that he's brought into the Welsh side after he leaves us, but that's the way it is. I think for those first two games, the front five are going to have a hell of a job on their hands, and they're going to need to stand up and be counted. And when are we going to see really Rhys Carré the best from him in terms of his ball carrying? And I think it's probably it's not a make or break, but it just hasn't happened for him. So I think there's that, and we need to sort out the centres. We've got centres. I look at them and I go, yeah, okay, but you need a partnership there. Who's going to be 12 and 13? I think Edwards is going to be 10, and obviously Thomas is going to be 9, and that's going to be an interesting dynamic, because I don't think, nobody plays like Thomas Williams, but I don't think that's who Dan Edwards necessarily plays with week in, week out. So sorting out that 9, 10, but 12 and 13 as well, I think it's going to be really important. So yeah, I think it'll be nice if we're at the end of this tournament, we're going, actually, so and so really came through and started to own that position and cemented there. Because I don't think there are many positions at the moment where you go, nobody's touching that player. He's going to start every week.
Yeah, absolutely agree on 13. I wouldn't even like to pick who I would start at 13, to be honest. I don't think there's an outstanding candidate there. But my hot take for Wales and the Six Nations is that I think Sam Costello finishes the Six Nations as our first choice 10. And it's not really based on much in particular. I just think there'll be, like, at some point, as there always is on the 10 position, there'll be a bit of pressure. And I thought Costello's looked really good coming back from injury for the Scarlets the last few weeks, actually. That Northampton game, he was excellent, and against Ulster as well. So I just fancy. I really like Dan Edwards. I think he's a really good player, but I fancy Sherritt will end up preferring Costello at 10 by the end of the tournament to get that attack moving a bit rather than Edwards. And yeah, and obviously, if Edwards is still set to start in the last week, I will Tonya Harding in to ensure that my my prediction comes through. Just baseball bat him in the knees.
You saying that I think it's a big tournament for Jockey as well.
Yeah,
in terms of getting that backline really firing and structure to it, and knowing exactly what he wants in every position. He's obviously done it as head coach. We showed some glimpses in the autumn, but I think for him to really, because it took him maybe a season and a bit to put his stamp on Cardiff to kind of really get to where we are for those first block of fixtures. So I think it's a big, and they still haven't got a defence coach permanently. Is that right? They're still kind of loaning ex-players do that.
I guess Tandy is a defence coach to a degree, but yeah, they haven't got a full-time, so nobody in the full-time role of defence coach.
Yeah, so I think for the coaching team, it's probably a big one, but Jockey in particular.
Good stuff. Right, a couple of quick any other businesses as time does going on. A shout out to Reese, who's at RJJBNB, Romeo Juliet Bravo November Bravo on Twitter, who's running a shirt bracket tournament this weekend or this week. He's got a bunch of the shirts that he's bought over the last couple of years, I assume, tallied them up and putting them against each other. So go and check out his. And on the back of that, Gareth has asked, what's our favourite jersey and why? I think myself and Simon did answer this a few weeks ago. But Fordey, give us your favourite Cardiff jersey that you can think of.
I think it's one of the, the blue and black AT&T jerseys from the 90s. I think a mate of mine has one of them, and as much as I like it, I do get annoyed seeing him wearing it, thinking, why can't that be mine? It's a lovely shirt. Yeah.
I'll have to nick it off him. And then one other question from Reese himself, who's doing the shirt bracket after that mention of the greatest ever 15 painting in the sexy centenary. He asked, what would our greatest ever 15 be? Now, that sounds like a good podcast on its own, which we shall do either later this season or ahead of next season and put it together. But gents, Simon first, one name off the top of your head that you think would definitely get in there for you?
Martin Williams.
Fordey?
Xavier Rush.
Gone.
Dan?
Safe in the back row there.
Yeah. Comfort zone.
Mine. Do you know, I didn't actually think of one off the top of my head, but I think it's gonna be tricky not to have Gethin Jenkins probably at the loose head as well. The tricky thing when it comes to it, I was thinking just how you do the podcast, because the difficulty is comparing eras, isn't it? That's always the thing with rugby, is that Cardiff had so many great players, the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and then so many great players across like the 90s, 2000s into the early 2010s. And you're like, how do you compare some of these sort of players against each other? How do you compare like Cliff Morgan against like a Jonathan Davis, say, or something like that? So yeah, but that's one for another time. I'll ask.
Felice played all those decades.
Yeah,
so, he's like the consistent Benjamin Button type character.
He's in the greatest ever 15 because he's the only tighter to have ever played for the club.
Not far off. Some days that's how it felt.
Yeah, but if you're a listener, and yeah, feel free to start putting your mind to that, because we will come back to you when we do that pod at some point. And that's all for today, I think. So, Simon, thank you very much.
Cheers, Dan.
Cheers, Fordey.
Cheers, Dan.
And thank you very much for listening. We will pause regular programming for the next few weeks while the Six Nations are on, but we're hoping to get some guests on. So keep an eye out on socials for that one, and make sure to subscribe to get us on our feed. But until those come out, we shall catch you soon.
Hello, I'm here during the lunch rush with Janice, who owns her own food truck.
Best cheesesteaks in town.
Janice traded up to Geico Commercial Auto Insurance for her food truck business. We're here where she needs us most.
They sure are.
We make it so easy for her to save, with customised coverage that grows with her business. Sorry, I just get so emotional talking about saving folks money.
Not this onion I'm chopping.
It's just so beautiful. Oh yeah, no, it's the onion.
Get a commercial auto insurance quote today at geico.com and see how much you could save. It feels good to Geico.